we would like to formally apologize in advance for anything you might be witnessing in this occurring video.
We apologize. We are sincerely sorry.
Just a disclaimer, because I always feel like we need to apologize for everything we do.
Most
Anyways, welcome to the completely professional, unprofessional podcast. Is it a podcast? Because I know we called it a podcast before, but we're definitely like looking into a camera right now.
I mean, there are recorded podcasts.
I know, but like, yeah, you got a point. But like, no one's gonna be listening to this.
They could be watching or listening or tuning us out.
Tuning us out? I hope they're tuning us out.
I
would
don't
too,
know.
honestly.
Happy fam.
Happy fam.
Happy fam.
Like we mentioned before, welcome to this segment in which we are calling Ang Kwento Natin.
Ang Kwento Natin.
Ang Kwento Natin.
Ang Kwento Natin.
What does that mean, Ko?
Our story.
Our story. So as y'all may know, we are at the beginning of FAHM, which is Filipino American History Month. So we are here to celebrate the many accomplishments, events, and people who have affected our lives here in America. Filipino American experience lives in events. Yes. So, like we said before, y'all already know we're not known for being professional.
Most definitely not.
If that's what you're looking for, look for somewhere else.
I'm so sorry. This is just the realest take
This
on
is the realest
information.
take.
But I'm glad that y'all are here with us to experience, potentially one of us learning new information and you being there watching and listening at home with us as well.
Agreed.
Yeah.
We should probably tell them like what this is.
Like,
okay. So essentially, what Ang Kwento Natin is us, the CoCos, educating each other about, for this month at least, during Filipino American History Month, about certain topics having to do with Filipino American history. So one of us pretty much does a lot of research on whatever topic we decide to do so, and we educate the other, who is hopefully completely unaware about the topic.
yeah, hopefully.
We'll see.
But like Co said, it's basically just a give and take. So one elaborates, one listens, and responses.
Essentially. Like we said, it's just that raw take. We'll see where it goes.
Honestly.
But for this week, I did a lot of research on a topic that I hope you're excited about, because
Okay, I'm excited.
I just thought it was kind of crazy, like learning about this for the first time. Of course, like, some general information, but hopefully later, when I get deeper into talking about one of the things, you'll be surprised, because I know I definitely was.
For sure.
But just to get us started, so obviously, we're here to celebrate Filipino American History Month. So just some quick information about that. A lot of people do mix up Filipino American History Month with Heritage Month. It is not heritage.
It is not heritage.
It is not heritage. Although we do appreciate our heritage, this month is all about focusing on our history, rather than our culture and what makes us who we are as a community.
Most definitely.
Although both do contribute to making our Filipino American identity, we're focusing more on our history and where we've come to now. Yes.
Yes.
So I know you already know a lot about this, since we've been talking about it since pretty much we've like gotten this position since like early April of this year.
April. For sure.
But yeah, CJ and I have just been like planning a lot of FAM stuff for a while. But just to do some quick overview, so Filipino American History Month actually got its roots from this organization called the Filipino American National Historical Society. We talked about this during GBM earlier, but their main goal is to preserve, document, and present Filipino American history, and to support scholarly research and artistic works which reflect our rich past as Filipino Americans. So fun fact, actually, they were established in around 1982, and they've actually been celebrating FAM for like around 30 years? I can't do math. 20 years.
20 years.
20 years, since 1992.
2 decades.
Established in 1982 and started celebrating FAM in 1992. Yes.
Yeah.
So around 30 years.
30 years. A
Yes.
little bit less than 30
A little
years.
less than 30 years. Obviously, we're not
28.
math majors. Yes, 28 years. So, of course, we mentioned this in our intro fam video where Filipinx Americans actually are the second largest Asian American group here in America, according to the 2010 U.S. Census. By the way, if you haven't filled out your 2020 census, you should do that.
Make sure you fill it out.
Get represented.
Exactly.
That aside, FAM has been unofficially been celebrated by Filipino Americans for about 30 years, but it wasn't officially recognized as a federal holiday until about November of 2009. So less than 10 years ago, which is kind of crazy because, you know, we have a pretty rich history in America.
Must have.
But just some other places that did recognize it. In 2006, Filipinx American History Month was actually recognized statewide in California by California Education, the Department of Education.
Let's go.
But not by the actual state, which is interesting. And then in 2008, Filipino American History Month was recognized by Hawaii. Shout out to Hawaii. But yeah, since 2009, about 11 years ago. 11 years ago, is when FAM like actually became recognized as a something to celebrate nationwide, which is kind of crazy, you know. We've been here for a while.
We really have.
But we'll take what we can get, I guess. But yeah, so here we are celebrating FAM as a familia. Yes.
Yeah. So what is our topic of today, or general talk of interest?
General talk of interest. We're pretty much focusing on a lot of Filipino first. We're starting pretty much from the beginning.
Okay.
So, I know we talked about this briefly when we scripted the Filipinx American History Month intro video. If you didn't see it, check it out on
check it
Instagram and other AB Samahan social medias.
Most of.
But I did mention a little bit of this information. So the reason why do you remember why we celebrate October or why we celebrate Filipinx American History Month during October?
Give me a general gist. Reminder.
It's in our script.
Wait.
He's gonna go through the entire script right now, but
No, I'm not going through the entire script. Isn't it? Wait. We were officially recognized in the month of October, no?
we were officially recognized, but why?
And then
Mike's on CJ.
the mic's on me. Wait, I'm trying to remember literally the 4 lines
The 4 lines.
that we both had.
Do you want me to just give it to you?
Give me 20 seconds.
Anticipation.
My mind is not working. I apologize.
It's all good. So, let me tell you. October 18th, 1587 was the first time Filipinos set foot on what would become American soil.
American soil.
That was straight out of the script.
I remember now.
So,
I hate it.
So we're gonna be talking about a lot of Filipino first. 2 big ones, I would say. So obviously, we talked about this already, but the first time Filipinos ever actually set foot in America was in October 18th, 1587. 1587.
1587.
That was a while back.
Really bad.
Listen, that's like, I can't do math. I don't want to say.
Wait.
433 years ago.
He said math major.
No, I just remember it from the script.
Okay.
Anyways, 1587, 433 years ago. So we celebrate FAM during this month because we're recognizing that first event where essentially Filipinos came to America for the first time. So definitely a big event that should be recognized. Just to give you a scope, what do you think was going on in 1587?
You know, there's a bunch of immigration, sailing back and forth, but at the same time there was a bunch of, to say, capturing of people just to bring over to land.
That's a good point. So what I was actually going for there is, do you remember when the Pilgrims settled in America?
Oh yes, fun times.
Do you remember the specific date for that? Yeah, honestly, I don't. I didn't. Are you gonna try for it?
I'm gonna try for
He's
it.
gonna try for it. Go look at my notes. I'm gonna just give it to
Wild
you.
guess, 1465.
No.
Play close.
No. You're off by like 200 years. Let me tell you. So, like I mentioned, 1587 is when the first Filipinos actually set foot in what would become American land. They actually landed in Morro Bay in California, up in San Luis Obispo. Shout out to north-ish Cal. But like you mentioned, they did land there as part of the Manila galleon trade with Spanish ships coming from Manila to trade back with Spanish settlements in the Americas. But they landed in Morro Bay, out in San Luis Obispo, or what would become California. But the Pilgrims, going back to them, they actually they landed in America in 1620. Isn't that weird?
That's pretty weird.
Essentially, they landed 33 years after the first Filipinos set foot on American land, which is kind of crazy because that means, wait a minute, so Filipinos were here before Americans were?
And that's the fact. That's the tea.
It's not really tea. Like,
No, it's definitely not.
it's just like an interesting thought that like Filipinos have definitely been tied, or not tied to the land, but like we've been here.
We've been here longer.
We have not been here longer.
Well,
I wouldn't say, okay, obviously Native Americans have been
of
here.
course,
It's
yes.
their land.
It is 100%
It's their land.
theirs.
But that's kind of crazy, you know?
It really is.
Obviously, there's like some articles online that are like, wait, if Filipinos landed in America first, then shouldn't it be Filipino land? Obviously, there's a lot of no to that. First of all,
most
colonizing is not a thing that us Filipinos do. It's a thing that we get.
We got.
I'm gonna cut that out. Point is, cut. Point is, Filipinos have been, or have made contact with. Filipinos landed in the Americas before even Americans did, I guess. Which is kind of crazy. So yeah, going back to that, Spanish galleons, Indios Luzones, Indians, or literally just native Luzonians from the Philippines were the first to actually land in what would become California, which is kind of crazy. Honestly, it's just the fact that like they arrived before the Pilgrims, you know?
And that's the crazy part, you know, especially coming to like such a big coast of like now today, you know, California, tracing it back all the way back to, the date was
October 18th?
October 18th of 1587.
Don't look at my notes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
intrigued. I'm intrigued by this topic, but it's kind of crazy, yeah, looking back and seeing the, you know, like the actual historical background of this country, this state, and how our, you know, I guess like origins related from it.
For sure.
Yeah.
But yeah. So first contact from Filipinos here in the US, or at least America in general. So of course, it took a while for Filipinos to actually get a footing here in the Americas, but next thing that we're really going to be talking about are our first Filipino communities, actually. So we know that the first Filipinos landed in 1587 along with the Manila galleons, but when do you think the first Filipino communities actually got settled in the US?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Sorry to put you on like the hot seat right now.
No, you're good. I'm giving an estimate. I'm probably assuming maybe around 1600s, 1700s, around there.
Okay, yeah. You're pretty close. 1763, like about a whole 200-ish, less than 200 years later, but still 200 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have our first Filipino settlement originating at around 1763. Do you want to take a jab at how they got there?
How they got to their first Filipino settlement?
Yeah.
Let me search something up.
He's searching something up. Is this legal?
Is this? But okay, wait. To answer your question,
1763. Well, I mean, you mentioned it earlier. It's through the Manila galleon trade. Okay, anyways, so, like I said, the first Filipino community was essentially established or at least began setting its roots in around 1763 because of the Manila galleon trade. But obviously, it's the Manila galleon trade. They weren't there optionally. They were kind of forced out of their country to be forced immigration, essentially, you know?
Yeah.
In a nice way to put it. Forced immigration.
Quote unquote nicest way.
There's no reason to put it in a nice way. It was slavery. It was
100% slavery and forced labor.
Essentially, this first community, having its roots like back in 1763, it was during the Manila galleon trade, obviously. That's how they were getting to America during this time, at least.
Yeah.
So obviously, it was not a good time for them, to say the least. So what actually happened was a lot of Filipinos, when they had the opportunity, started jumping ship.
To
literally jumping ship.
Okay.
You'd be surprised at how many would survive, considering that they're like literally jumping out into cold water.
Yeah.
And like hoping to swim to shore.
Yeah.
But it worked for them, because eventually you get a community like this established and to like start existing in the U.S., which became the first Filipino community. So I mentioned that this was happening between the Spanish galleons, the Manila galleons from the American Spanish colonies, and Manila, of course, in the Philippines. So if you were to take a jab at it, where do you think this first community is located? If you're getting Filipinos jumping ship to settle in these lands.
California.
See, you think California, right?
I think, wait.
The answer is not California.
It's not.
Right?
But would it be?
Right? They actually.
Is it not California?
It's not California.
Where is it?
It's Louisiana.
Huh?
Huh? See, exactly my reaction when I first heard about it.
Wait.
Like, wait.
How does this work?
So, obviously, a lot of locations in the south of the United States were definitely Spanish-owned at this time, including Florida. Obviously, a large chunk of what would be Mexico, and that includes regions of Louisiana. So, of course, honestly, the connection wasn't here at first. We don't have the Panama Canal, so you know what the Panama Canal is, right? Okay, like, as to why Filipinos were there is kind of confusing, because obviously we associate the Manila galleons between at least Spanish colonies in Mexico and California to the Philippines.
Yeah.
But of course, there's more Spanish colonies than that. They have to get around somewhere. There were Spanish colonies across the southern U.S. as well as Mesoamerica, so it's wherever the Spaniards were. But yeah, the first community actually started in the marshlands of Louisiana, which is kind of interesting.
That
like,
really is.
You would not think that. So it's an interesting connection that you could build, but apparently from some sources that I've gathered, it was very alike what living in the Philippines was. Apparently, they felt very comfortable living in the marshlands just because it kind of suited some of the climate that was found in the Philippines.
Similar environment, huh?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
But a lot of the so I wish I could show you a picture of what it looked like, but essentially a lot of the settlements found in this area were marsh houses, like literally built on stilts in water. They definitely relied on using boats to get around from house to house and from marshlands to marshlands. So it was a really interesting take, not an interesting take. What would you say about that? What is it called? Like, they felt at home. In short, not at home, but like obviously it wasn't too far from that.
Yeah.
I guess
It was the closest thing they could get at the time to potentially being there.
so. Yeah, they settled in the Louisiana marshlands, like not too far from New Orleans, which was a French-owned colony at the time. But 1763, they've been there for a fat minute. So why don't we really know about this today? Why do you think that? Because obviously this is the first time you're hearing about it.
This is honestly the first time, yeah.
So why don't you think we really know about it?
Like specifically like the Louisiana plantation or like their first Filipino
Like the first Filipino settlements, I guess.
honestly, like I feel like it's just because it's been overlooked by a lot of the other events throughout history. But other than that, like I really haven't really heard about, like the first settlements of our like culture, like of Filipinos in general.
Yeah.
You just usually hear about like, oh yeah, like just the general logistics and like historical events that happened within our own timeline, not like specific intricate details such as colonization and like settlements like this.
Yeah. Like you definitely hit it like right on the head, but like of course us being an ethnic minority, a racial minority here in the US, we're not going to hear much about how we as a people in the US came to be, just because in general the American school system doesn't do much in terms of educating our youth about different racial minorities and their history in our country, although we do all have a rich background, no matter where you're from and what culture you identify with.
Facts.
But other than that, there's also like a sad fact that St. Malo, of course, although we wish it was still here, it has ceased to exist. Sad fact. So it was actually wiped out during a hurricane in 1905. So that's why we don't hear much about it in terms of today. A lot of residents did end up just assimilating into closer communities such as New Orleans, which at the time was a bustling community. But like still considering that like 1763, around that time, all the way up to 1905, that's like still a good 150 years of history that community has. So just to give you a sense of how long they've been in existence, they pretty much started settling there since before the American Revolutionary War. They existed through the Civil War and even saw action in the War of 1812, which is like, what? So actually, fun fact, the St. Malo Manila men, who were basically the Filipino descendants who were from, or who settled in St. Malo, Louisiana, were actually drafted by Andrew Jackson
Really?
during the War of 1812 to help defend New Orleans from British invaders. So like just a quick look into how like Filipinos were definitely a part of American history, although others may see it as a small part. It's still something to acknowledge, just to like kind of give y'all a look into like how intertwined with American history we actually are. And of course it goes with a lot of other racial groups here in the US, but it's just something that we as Filipinx Americans might overlook, just because me personally, like I grew up in the American school system. I didn't learn much about other racial backgrounds, especially my own.
Yeah.
Because just in general, we're not who's focused on, which is just a sad fact. But
Yeah.
we're definitely here to change things, hopefully for the future. If anything, take us as your chance to educate yourselves. Maybe don't completely rely on us.
Yeah, most definitely not. But we are good,
Good gateway.
and then it's up to your own research and own interest to actually seek out this information, because in general, like it's not going to be given to you always. Just like how you have to actually strive to learn, and pick up your own knowledge about specific things. So definitely, like as EJ said, use this as a gateway. We honestly don't have all the answers and facts to give to you, but
we're here to spark the conversation, and to get y'all interested in learning more about your own history. So what do you think about that?
That was actually really interesting. Like learning about like how the first settlement wasn't on the coast.
It was like on the coast. It was like Louisiana Bayou kind of area.
Well, yeah, but it's like when I hear like first settlement of like of like a peoples, I expected, especially if they immigrated to this country, like I expected for the first one to be on the coast, like because that's where they directly kind of came from.
No, I completely understand that. Yeah,
but for the fact of them actually kind of moving it a little bit more inwards, that to me was like, whoa, that's kind of crazy in my opinion.
It just took me a second to like, how did they like
did they travel?
The fact that they were a jumping ship, but the ship that they were jumping had to be in like the Gulf of Mexico, but like you got a whole continent in the way.
Really
so
do.
It's like one of those small brain things that you like.
They really traveled a lot.
Yeah, that's the point. They traveled a lot to get there.
Here was where they started, jumping ship, and this is where they came to, and then this is like a huge land barrier that they had to cross, which is really, really astonishing if you think about it.
Yeah, I'm just like, it's crazy how like the biggest Filipino communities back in the day were actually in Louisiana.
Yeah,
and like in that region before like the second wave of migration to like the West Coast, Hawaii, for the sugar plantations there. But we'll get into more detail about that later in FAM. You'll most likely hear more about that.
Most def.
But yeah, just a few Filipino firsts for our Filipinx American History Month. Oh my god. Kwento Natin.
Kwento Natin.
Kwento Natin. Just a few interesting Filipino firsts to know about, to think, to ponder about, to let marinate in your head. Because I know, like, for some reason, I just assumed, me personally being the ignorant person I am, like, I always assumed that, like, oh, Filipinos got here because of, being not drafted in the Navy, but because they joined the Navy, or because they took up medical jobs as nurses to immigrate here to the country, because that's pretty much all we hear about, or at least all I hear about as a first generation Filipino American in America. I don't know many people who are more than first, second, third generation who've lived here for like, whose families have been settled in America for like hundreds of years.
Yeah, for a while.
So it's kind of weird to know that we definitely have had a presence in America for a long time. But just some food for thought, definitely.
Definitely food for thought. But thank you for sticking with us to the end of our podcast, aka Kwento Natin. Very big thank you for that. Stay tuned for the rest of the content, and as well as celebrating the rest of FAM with us as well. Any other closing thoughts?
No, mom, sir. It's really
No, sir. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
But hopefully y'all are staying safe. But until next time,
we should make a catchphrase.
We should make a catchphrase.
I don't have the brains to think about a catchphrase right now.
We'll get back to you at the next podcast.
Wait. Like, we gotta do it. This has gotta be like one of those, like, okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Like, think about it. Okay, we're gonna say something. 1, 2, 3.
We'll get back to y'all. But until then, stay safe and see y'all later, mga audience.